And well, welcome to the program. I'm Amarachi Ubani. Here's what's coming up within the half hour. An alleged Israeli airstrike hits a recently opened water desalination plant in Gaza, sending panic and chaos. Iran says it is confident and fully prepared to counter widened U.S. economic sanctions. Plus, massacre in Kent's coffin by criminal gangs leave dozens dead in Haiti. Let's begin the world today. Well, we begin with the huge explosion that struck Gaza City's Sheikh Radwan neighborhood, reportedly hitting a recently opened water desalination plant. Eyewitnesses there said the facility had opened less than a month ago and was supplying drinking water to local residents. They also reported that a nearby camp for displaced people was damaged. Palestinian media said the blast was caused by an Israeli airstrike, although the Israeli military is yet to comment on that. The strike comes amid renewed tensions, with Israel warning of intensified attacks over drones with Gaza. Well, Iran says it is preparing to withstand a sweeping new round of U.S. economic sanctions after Washington announced what it calls an economic D-Day against Tehran. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent describes the measures as the country's biggest financial offensive against Iran, targeting sectors including shipping, aviation, technology, gold, and digital assets. Washington is also warning other countries that banks and businesses continuing to trade with Iran could face isolation themselves. But Iran says it has a plan to manage the pressure, while China, Tehran's biggest oil customer, has rejected what it calls unilateral U.S. sanctions. The standoff is also affecting global energy markets, with the Strait of Hormuz remaining a major flashpoint. The vital waterway normally carries around a fifth of the world's oil and gas supplies, raising fears that further disruption could push energy prices even higher. Well, China's pushed back against Washington's growing economic pressure on Iran, warning it will firmly safeguard its rights and interests against U.S. secondary sanctions. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Lin Jian says unilateral sanctions without the UN Security Council's authorization were illegitimate, warning that economic warfare and maximum pressure would only fuel tensions and disrupt the global financial system. China, the biggest buyer of Iranian oil, defends its trade with Tehran as legitimate under international law. It also says its cooperation should not be disrupted. Beijing does not reveal any countermeasures or confirm whether Washington has given it a deadline to change its dealings with Iran. The confrontation raises the prospects of wider economic clashes between the two world's largest economies, as Washington warns no country is beyond the reach of U.S. sanctions. Meanwhile, the United States Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has warned America's adversaries are rapidly expanding their military capabilities as President Donald Trump pushes a record $1.5 trillion defense budget for 2027. Speaking in Wisconsin, Secretary Hegseth says rival nations are developing and deploying new weapons at a pace that should concern Americans, arguing the United States must maintain overwhelming military strength to deter potential threats. Secretary Hegseth describes President Trump's proposed budget as the largest military spending plan in U.S. history, with major funding expected for nuclear weapons, missile defense, warships, and aircraft production. The proposal would push annual U.S. defense spending beyond the $1 trillion mark for the first time, but the massive figure is not yet approved. The $1.5 trillion request must still pass through Congress before it can become law, as the Trump administration seeks what it describes as a generational investment in America's military capabilities.
We want a military so strong and powerful that our enemies never think about testing us. But as you know, our adversaries are not sitting idly by. They're moving fast. They're developing and delivering new capabilities at a rate that should be sobering for every single American. Which is why President Trump is asking our friends in Congress to pass a $1.5 trillion budget for our warriors. It is a bold, generational investment, the largest military budget in history.
Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney today announced $20 billion of retaliatory tariffs on U.S. goods as a trade war between the two countries escalates. On Monday, Carney had said in an address Canada will negotiate if U.S. has the right attitude. Today, he announced counter tariffs of 15, 25 or 50% will be imposed on some imports from the U.S. It will effectively match U.S. tariffs imposed by Trump, dollar for dollar, according to Canada's finance minister. Also, a package of measures aimed at supporting businesses and workers will include an investment of 1.5 Canadian dollars for small and medium-sized businesses has been announced. Some analysts say the escalation of trade war comes at a bad time for Republicans, as the potential fallout threatens a bunch of those states that could decide control of the U.S. Senate. Canada's response comes as the U.S. Trump administration announced a tariff hike on automobiles originating in Canada. The U.S. president saying he will increase tariffs on Canadian cars and trucks, as well as auto parts, from 25% to 50% as of January 1st. Let's bring in our Washington correspondent Maria Bird now for some more on this. Maria, first off, has the Trump administration reacted to Mark Carney's counter tariffs on U.S. goods?
Well, the Trump administration has definitely been very clear that they are not going to back down. And so have they necessarily had a formal response? I think we can expect the president to have something here very shortly. We know that many are a bit concerned. As we know, the president had previously stated that there could potentially be an additional tariffs. And we know that this is a very upcoming time frame on this, and that we're such a close neighboring country, and obviously the automobile industry is definitely very concerned about this potential trade war.
Right, and the Canadian Prime Minister does say he is matching U.S. dollar for dollar. It's a promise he made since Saturday after the Trump administration did toy with the idea of increasing tariffs on Canada. Give us a picture what that could look like, you know, the tariffs and the counter tariffs and its impact on American and Canadian goods.
Well, as we know, the U.S., Canada are neighboring countries. We've even heard the administration discuss the Canada almost being like another state. But we know that that has been a political challenge, obviously, one that the U.S. has been battling through for quite some time. But we know that the American people have looked at Canada as a very close ally for many years. We have not even produced some of our needs around automobile parts because we have had, if you think about the automobile industry, which has heavily been in that Midwest region right there bordering Canada, there are individuals, there are companies and people that come each and every day between the U.S. and Canada for work. And so this would have a major impact on the economy. This would have a major impact on goods in the country, but also it'll have a major impact on the way in which the U.S. and Canada interact, which is something that I think many Americans are surprised about and not quite prepared for.
Yeah, I do remember President Trump saying that Canada is behaving as a 51st state without being a state. Do Americans, however, support these new tariffs by the Trump administration? What do they make of Canada's response? As I imagine, they will be the ones bearing the consequences for these tariffs.
Yes, typically, as we know, many Americans are concerned about having the pass down effect. We know that what has been stated just here in the last 6 months with the conflict between the U.S. and Iran has potentially cost the American household. And so that has been one of the biggest pieces I think that Americans are very much concerned about is whether or not this will also create a potential challenge for what the costs are for Americans. Now, as we also know, though, that this trade war, not only the everyday American having potential cost around their funds and the kind of extenuating costs, but also, too, the business relationships. U.S. and Canada have very close business relationships. There are many companies that have chosen to actually operate out of Canada, but majority of their business is actually in the United States. And so that is something that could potentially cause great challenge for many Americans. We also know, too, that there is back and forth each and every day between Americans and Canadians, and even just the actual tourism. I mean, there's a lot of tourism that happens between the two countries. And so this would be a major, major concern. And we're also looking at a $40 trillion deficit that's most recently been announced that Americans are looking at. So again, even though there are concerns around tariffs, I think that Americans are also looking to see if some of this could have a impact on our economy and trying to obviously get out of some of this debt. And so it'll be very interesting to see with the Secretary of Treasury, how he responds and how this could potentially have some relief in that area.
Thanks, Maria. Just before you go, the Canadians did say that they did not call for this trade conflict. Is there any chance the Trump administration could back down, seeing Canada's response?
Exactly correct. I think that the Canadians were a bit, I don't want to say surprised, but obviously the hope was that the U.S. relationship and that this would not be a trade war between the U.S. and Canada, being as though we are neighbors and all within North America. And so I think it's going to really be incumbent upon diplomats between the two countries to really work together to find ways to mitigate some of this that I think is going to be really necessary for both the U.S. and Canada.
Thanks again, Maria. Thank you for your reporting. Now away from the United States, dozens of people have been killed in a fresh gang attack in Haiti, with authorities deploying reinforcements to the commune of Kenskoff, east of Port-au-Prince. Haitian human rights group RNDDH says the death toll could rise to as many as 40 as search operations continue. Several people have been wounded, dozens of homes destroyed by fire. A church being used as a shelter for people displaced by Haiti's wider violence was also among the locations attacked. The government has now sent additional security forces to Kenskoff as authorities try to regain control from the Vive and Sam gang coalition. The latest bloodshed highlights a severe security crisis still gripping Haiti, where gang violence continues to claim lives and force communities from their homes. A Spanish fishing vessel has sunk off the coast of Galicia after burning for hours, with all 3 crew members rescued safely. The 25-meter-long Corvo caught fire late Monday night, about 8 nautical miles northeast of Estancia de Barres. With the blaze quickly spreading, the 3 crewmen abandoned ship and escaped into a life raft. They were picked up unharmed by nearby fishing vessel Rio Junco. Rescue crews caught the fire through the night, but the vessel eventually sank around 5:40 this morning. The maritime rescue vessel Maria Pita remained in the area to recover debris and monitor for any possible pollution. The cause of the fire remains unknown, while authorities continue to assess the incident. The United Nations has issued a fresh warning over the escalation human cost of the war in Ukraine. A senior UN official telling Security Council the need to end the conflict could not be more urgent. The United Nations Under-Secretary General Rosemary DiCarlo says July saw more civilian deaths in Ukraine than any month since 2022. According to UN human rights data, at least 16,874 civilians including 820 children, have been verified killed since Russia's full-scale invasion began in February of 2022. More than 51,000 others have been injured, the true figures believed to be significantly higher. As the war enters its 4.5-year mark, the United Nations is warning that without urgent diplomatic action, the cycle of death, destruction, and displacement will only deepen.
For 4.5 years, this war has brought death, destruction, and displacement on a devastating scale. And the toll on civilians continues to rise. In July, more civilians were killed in Ukraine than in any month since May 2022. On Friday, 21 August, 16 people reportedly killed and at least 140 wounded in a Russian drone strike on the largest shopping center in the city of Kryvyi Rih. At least 23 children were reportedly among the injured. This despicable attack was a so-called double tap strike, with a second drone hitting the location just as the emergency workers rushed in to help. In total, since February 2022, OHCHR has verified that at least 16,874 civilians, including 820 children, have been killed in Ukraine. 51,273 civilians, including 3,126 children, have been injured. The actual figures are likely significantly higher.
Still to come after the break on The World Today. She's got Rapunzel-like hair. It's 9 feet of locks, and she's just won a Guinness World Record. I'll tell you all about it. Stay with us. Welcome back. The Nigerian ambassador designate to Sudan, Ambassador Danladi Nyaku, has presented copies of his letters of credence to the Sudanese Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, Ambassador Mohideen Ibrahim, in Khartoum. The presentation formally marks the beginning of Ambassador Nyaku's diplomatic assignment in Sudan as he takes on the responsibility of strengthening bilateral relations between Nigeria and Sudan. The engagement is expected to further deepen cooperation between the two countries across areas of mutual interest, including trade, investment, security, and people-to-people relations. Africa's border management is set for a major transformation with greater reliance on digital technology, biometrics, and intelligence-led systems while keeping border management human-centered. The Comptroller General of Nigeria Immigration Service, Kemi Nandap, stated this at the 4-day annual conference of African Borderlands Research Network, organized in partnership with Lagos State University and the Nigeria Immigration Service. As Nigeria hosts its first African Borderlands Research Network conference, researchers, scholars, and policymakers are gathering in Lagos to explore connected borderlands, socio-cultural integration, and the role of policy, research, and security in strengthening cross-border cooperation. The conversation moves along with the Comptroller General of Nigeria Immigration Service, Kemi Nandap, calling for smarter border management.
The border of the future will be more digital. It will be more biometric and intelligence-led, but it must also remain human-centered, protecting the state without separating communities, facilitating legitimate movement without compromising security, and using technology without losing sight of the people behind the data. Nigeria is therefore committed to strengthening partnerships in border technology, biometric identity management, cybersecurity, surveillance, intelligence sharing, capacity building, and research.
Delivering the Minister of Interior's address, Senior Advisor to the Minister in Policy Research, Karim Olajoku, calls on Africa to adopt evidence-based approach to border management, while ensuring research remains responsive to practical realities.
Building resilient border lines therefore requires us to see border communities not merely as populations to be secured, but as partners in security, peace, and development. I equally encourage deeper partnerships among our universities, security agencies, regional institutions, and development partners. Research must help us anticipate tomorrow's challenges, not merely explain yesterday's problems.
For Lagos State University, the gathering goes beyond hosting an international academic conference. It reflects the university's commitment to generating knowledge that speaks to realities, challenges, and aspirations of Nigeria and the African continent.
Our commitment is reflected in the establishment of our Bachelor of Arts program in Border and Migration Studies. The partnership between the university and the institution responsible for managing immigration and migration matters is both symbolic and practical. Research needs practice. Practice needs research. And both need policy.
For Lagos State, we are Nigeria's economic and commercial hub and a major gateway for people, goods, capital, and ideas. Our relationship with neighboring countries is shaped every day by formal and informal, local and international movements. This makes it imperative that we produce the knowledge and human capacity required to manage mobility intelligently.
Through its interdisciplinary approach, ABON continues to promote deeper understanding of border governance, regional integration, and border cooperation in Africa. Well, I thought it was longer than this. Indian content creator Reno Darial has set a new Guinness World Record for the longest hair on a living woman, with her remarkable locks measuring more than 8 feet long. Her hair measures at 271.50 centimeters. It's been growing without a trim since 2015. Ms. Daria says maintaining the hair takes hours each day, I imagine, including time for washing, drying, and detangling. Her record was officially measured in Haldwani in India in April of 2026, surpassing the previous record of 257.33 centimeters. Well, she says her achievement is inspired by Indian cultural traditions, and she hopes it will make her country and community proud. I guess it's still easily manageable for now. Thanks for watching The World Today. I'm Amarachi Ubani.